I'm Matthew Taylor, and this is the Access Daily Brief for July 9th, 2026. I want to talk today about Tucker Carlson, the possibility of a third party, and the 2028 election and beyond. Now, this might seem early. It might seem like, whoa, 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 we haven't even gotten to the 2026 midterm elections this November. But why are we even starting to talk about 2028? But there's a lot that's brewing right now in right wing politics that is going to impact 2028 and also impact what goes on beyond that. And I think we should be paying attention because some of the rumblings about a third party should have us quite concerned about the danger that might be ahead of us. You see, Donald Trump entered Republican politics in 2015 really embracing two different slogans. The major slogan that he embraced came from Ronald Reagan, Make America Great Again. That's the one that made it on the hats. But there's a lesser slogan that he also embraced in that campaign, America First. That phrase, America First, has a long history in American politics. It was used by the Know Nothing Party in the 19th century in connection with some of their own nativism and anti-Catholic and anti-immigrant sentiments, right? So it carries these connotations of white Anglo-Saxon Protestant hegemony. It was also adopted by isolationists during World War I, who were demanding that immigrants, in this case German and Irish and Italian Americans, need to prove their loyalty, prove that they are really connected to America first. In the 1920s, the KKK and other eugenicists adopted the phrase America First as part of a vision of racial purity in the US. In the 1930s, it becomes a slogan of American fascists and supporters of the Nazi Party, including the German American Bund group. And in the 1940s, Charles Lindbergh helps to form this America First committee that adds a whole bunch of anti-Semitism into this language of America First. Like, basically, should we be intervening to protect Jews in Europe, or should we only be concerned with America First? And so America First had all these connotations before Trump adopted it in 2015 and 2016 as part of his campaign, right? It signals nativism. We only care about our people. Anti-interventionism. We should not be getting involved in foreign affairs and on behalf of other people. And some elements of white supremacy and anti-Semitism are also kind of contained in that America First brand. And Trump's coalition over the last 10 years has really been a kind of eclectic mix of traditional conservatives, kind of old school Republicans, evangelicals who are very pro-Israel, and then these America First nativists, right? That's the crowd of Trump supporters who show up in Charlottesville in the summer of 2017, chanting, Jews will not replace us. We see a lot of these people showing up on January 6th as well. And so there's been this coalition, this connection that is kind of paradoxical in some ways. Some of it's pro-Israel, some of it's deeply anti-Israel and anti-Semitic. But that's starting to crack up right now. And we're reaching the point right now where this America First crowd is actually starting to talk about forming a third party, an America First party. And one of the central figures in this kind of America First brand is Tucker Carlson. I'd like to show you today some of what Tucker Carlson has been signaling over the last few months, even within the last week, about a potential third party that could really impact the 2028 election and beyond. Because right now, there's a low-grade civil war going on about the future of Trump's coalition, about the spirituality of that coalition, and about what MAGA and America First could mean going forward. So who's Tucker Carlson? Tucker is a longtime navigator of American right-wing politics and American media. He's been on CNN, on Fox News, on all these different cable networks. Up until 2023, he had the most highly watched cable news show on Fox News, and then he got fired. Complicated story about Dominion voting systems suing Fox News and advertisers and complaints about harassment within his office, all kinds of different reasons that he gets fired. He gets fired in 2023. But what he managed to do was take his Fox News media fame and convert that into influencer fame. And so he created his own platform. He has a podcast, and he's basically out on his own now. And there was always this element of kind of America First, kind of conspiracy theories, and these hints at anti-Semitism in some of the things that Tucker was saying, even when he was on cable news. All of that has gone into hyperdrive since he left Fox News in 2023. And now that he's out on his own, the gloves are off, and Tucker has really let his crazy flag fly. Now, this might seem strange to people who are focused mostly on American politics, but it was actually Israel's war in Gaza after Hamas's attack on October 7th, Israel goes into Gaza the brutal campaign of trying to drive out Hamas and recover the hostages that are there. And it's that war in Gaza that actually starts to create this fracture between America First and the MAGA establishment. Because a lot of these America First figures, like Tucker or like Candace Owens, who don't support Israel, who don't support Jews, they look at American support for this war and Republican support for this war and MAGA support for this war and say, hey, hold on a minute, we're not in support of this. And some of them start even calling what Israel is doing in Gaza a genocide. These are people coming from the far right. This is not kind of leftists on college campuses. These are people like Candace Owens who are calling Israel's actions in Gaza a genocide. And they're very anti-Israel. And so this war in Gaza starts to drive this wedge between America First and mainstream MAGA. And then the Charlie Kirk assassination happens in September of 2025. And that just drives the wedge in further because Charlie Kirk is kind of a mediating figure between these two camps. He's respected on both sides. He's friends with Tucker, friends with Candace Owens, but he's also pro-Israel, and Netanyahu claims him as a friend. And so he was kind of a moderating or mediating figure between these different factions within Trump's coalition. And when he's assassinated, both sides try to claim his legacy. And there's still this kind of ongoing fight within these circles about Charlie Kirk, about what he actually believed, about his position on Israel. They're all kind of trying to claim him for their sides in this civil war. And then the war in Iran that Trump launches at the end of February of this year, that's like the 2x4 that broke the camel's back. I mean, you almost couldn't think of anything that would further fracture Trump's base than for him to go and get involved in a foreign war, a kind of preemptive war that is not a defensive war, that is at the urging of Netanyahu and the government of Israel in coalition with Israel without really clear goals, that starts to create these shockwaves in the American and the global economy because Iran seizes the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, all of that kind of compounds to cause this America First crowd to really start disavowing Trump. And Tucker and Candace and a bunch of these people, they've started breaking away from Trump. Now, Tucker Carlson, he is obsessed with Israel. He talks about Israel constantly on his podcast. He thinks that Israel functionally controls the United States. And there's all these elements of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories about how Jews really control the world. Jews control America. And it goes way beyond just criticizing Netanyahu or criticizing the government of Israel into outright anti-Semitism. He has brought Nazis like Nick Fuentes onto his podcast. He has brought Holocaust deniers onto his podcast. And so he's platforming these visions and these ideas that are much more aligned with this kind of old style of Protestant anti-Semitism that has very deep roots in American history. Now, over the last few months, Tucker has started sending some very interesting signals. So in April, he goes on his podcast and he apologized for ever supporting Trump, for encouraging others to support Trump in 2024, and said he no longer supports Donald Trump. And in June, he goes on a Canadian podcast and actually denounces the Republican Party and says he will not support the Republican Party. He's no longer going to support the Republicans. And I want to show you a clip just so you get a feel for how he actually talks about this stuff.
Well, the poll numbers now are, tell a pretty clear story about it. I would not support the Republican Party. There's no chance I would support the Republican Party. I'm not going to support the Democratic Party. I don't know what I'm going to do. But at this point, how could I or any American voter support a political party that's not loyal to the United States, that puts the interests of a foreign country above those of its own citizens? That's it's not possible to vote for people like that, and I'm not going to. And I think I voted Republican my entire life. I worked at Fox News, CNN, right, MSNBC. I've been a consistent defender for 35 years of the Republican Party. I mean, very consistent defender. But there's no defending this because it's immoral. And it's exactly the opposite of what a political party in a democracy is charged with doing, which is representing its own voters, its own citizens, its own nation. And they're not doing that. So, no, I'm out. And
Now, in the same interview, Tucker hints the Republicans and Democrats are actually both treasonous parties. They're committing treason against the United States because they are putting other groups' interests, including Israel, especially in this case, over the United States. And here he is contrasting those two Trump slogans: Make America Great Again versus America First.
The country, make America great again. So on a literal level, people wanted that. They still want it. I still want it. But it was imprecise by design. So the phrase America First, however, which has kind of been retired, you don't hear that very often, is precise. Just put your own country first as you make decisions as a leader of your country. And that's very obvious. Like it's hard to imagine that any leader would use any other standard to make decisions. Of course, just like a father makes decisions, what's best for my family? A leader has to make decisions on the same basis, but they don't use that anymore because, of course, they're making decisions on the basis of other criteria. What's best for this company? What's best for Israel? What's best for our donors? I mean, I just want to say again, that's unacceptable. That's not just like they're off in the wrong direction. Like that is unacceptable. That's treasonous. It's immoral. It can't continue. You can't have a government that calls itself democratic, a democratic republic in our case, that is representing interests outside the country.
Now, on July 1st, so just about a week ago, the Columbia Journalism Review publishes an interview with Tucker. And I want to read to you a little of what he says in this interview, because I think it's again, important. And he's talking here about how the Democratic and Republican parties are basically in lockstep. And on questions of war or the economy, they're functionally doing the same thing. And here's what he says. That's not a democracy. That's a one-party state posing as a democracy, and it needs to be broken. And there's going to be a third party, and I'm going to do everything I can to bring that about. I'm going to help build a third party. There should be a good faith effort to figure out what benefits the country. But then in the same interview, he also said, I don't want to be a candidate. I'm not sure I believe him on that. So on the 4th of July, Tucker releases a supercut video from his YouTube channel of him talking on various podcasts about his own view of America. Here he is talking about the problem of dual citizenship and why citizens of America should only be Americans.
I don't have any options. And by the way, if I were in charge, if I were some sort of benign monarch, hopefully benign, no dual passports in my country. Sorry. I mean, because that really is the measure of commitment. Are you all in or not? Like, do you have options? Have you burned the boats, as they say? And I think you should be required to burn the boats. No, you can't go back. You're here. And once you are, this is what marriage is. This is why you treat your wife better than you treat your girlfriend, because you're married to her and it's very hard to get out of, and you got children together. And so in a normal marriage, the person's like, well, one thing I know I'm not doing is divorcing. So I'm going to actually try, I'm going to suck it up and try. And that works. Sucking it up and trying works. Right. I feel the same way about my country. I'm not going anywhere. I don't have another passport. I wouldn't get another passport. How many people do I know with dual passports? Like 1 million? And they tend to be the richest people and the people who've gotten the most from the country, who've really benefited from our systems, which they've then destroyed. And I think that should be illegal. Like, pick a country and pick a military. No, you can't serve in a foreign military. What? And no, we're not going to pay you to serve in a foreign. I don't care what the country. I don't care if it's England or Sweden, where my ancestors came from. I don't care if it's Burkina Faso, where yours came from, or Iran, where yours came from. It's like, no. And you should be all in. I just, the whole idea of it, it's like an Airbnb. They're using, the country's like a fucking Airbnb to them. And it's not an Airbnb. It's my house.
And then, of course, if you have been paying attention to this feed, if you go back to the episode that I recorded on June 24th, I have the whole expose about Tucker and how he's using the Appeal to Heaven flag, this very kind of potent right-wing symbol, how he's inserting that into his podcast studio in a quite prominent way. So I would say that Tucker is sending some pretty clear signals here. He wants to help create a third party. He's kind of angling that he might want to be the candidate, or at least an influential thought leader within that party. And he wants that party's brand to be America First. He wants it to disrupt the current state of American politics. So why does this matter? The tectonic plates of American politics are shifting and moving right now. And just because Donald Trump is becoming unpopular doesn't mean that will necessarily benefit the Democrats. And if you think that the idea of a guy like Tucker Carlson becoming president or running for president or something sounds crazy, think about how Donald Trump won in 2016. He was an outsider and a conspiracist. In Trump's case, it was the Obama birther conspiracies. Tucker has these more anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, but they're both kind of framing themselves as outsiders, right? Donald Trump was a media figure. He was a constant commentator on on Fox News, and he knows how to keep people watching, how to keep people's attention, how to distract the media and keep the media narrative going. Tucker has that same skill set. And Donald Trump picked up on one issue that both of the parties seemed to feel out of step on. In his case, it was this kind of anti-immigration cause. Tucker is picking up on this anti-Israel cause, that where you see anti-Israel sentiment spreading on both the right and the left, and he's going to capitalize on that. I think media figures are much more savvy and skilled in navigating this attention-driven and disaggregated media environment that we have right now than the lifelong politicians. And let's look at how Tucker has handled the last few months with his rollout of this beef with Donald Trump leading to a third party. He's very good at capturing attention, getting his message across. And I think if he does try to run, or if there's a third party, it could get some real traction. Now, how does any of this relate to religion? Well, what Tucker and the other America First kind of influencers and leaders are doing is they're tapping into some very deep currents of American Christian supremacy and Christian nationalism. They're kind of bypassing this whole kind of Christian Zionist evangelical moment that has kind of been the dominant style of Christian nationalism for the last 50 years or so. And they're tapping back into an older, more genteel, more bipartisan sort of Protestant anti-Semitism that has long been a part of the American political landscape. Tucker is less Christian nationalist per se, and I'd say he's more of a WASP elitist, right? White Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And each of those dimensions of being a WASP is important to him. Being white, Anglo-Saxon, and Protestant. And that's really the message that he keeps driving home. And whether this America First third party actually materializes, there will almost certainly be at least one, maybe 10 America First candidates running in the 2028 presidential race, either inside or outside of the Republican Party, because these battle lines are already being drawn. I think Tucker will be a force in the 2028 election. And there's different paths, and there's way too many variables at this point to really predict how this will play out. He could really push for J.D. Vance. They're close friends, and J.D. Vance seems to share a lot of these America First sentiments. And that way, Tucker could kind of become the kingmaker, have a big say in the policy direction of the Republican Party. He might decide to be a candidate himself and run in the Republican primary on this America First platform, make a lane out of that. It would make him a lot of enemies, but Trump has proven that if you can win the Republican primary, everyone else will fall in line. Or he could do this third party thing. It's probably the most risky bid, never really been successful in American politics, but that could move him even more into the heart of American politics, drive a new generation of American Christian anti-Semitism. And that's the thing I really want to communicate to people who are committed to democracy, who are committed to pluralism and the rule of law, to the people who support and vote for Democrats today. We don't win by default. Just because Trump is unpopular doesn't mean that Trump's voters will just automatically flock to Democrats. The Democratic Party is also deeply unpopular right now. People who have supported Trump in the past or who are sympathetic to Trump might actually go for someone like Tucker or another America First candidate. And so we need to be paying attention to all the landscape and all the ways that it's shifting right now, because it's not only Democrats and Republicans. There are other forces in American politics that could be quite influential. Thank you.